We're good. We're going to call this morning's committee of the whole meeting to order at 9:34. First item is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions to today's agenda? Reeve Hall.
There was an email that I obviously didn't get sent correctly regarding the Northern Alberta Development Council. And there was some stakeholder outreach, and I had hoped that we would be able to participate and talk about it and respond to that. I think Councillor Wallach attended the in-person session, and just trying to figure out how to forward the email to Leah, but.
So item 8.1, NADC stakeholder outreach.
And the timing is that it's due before the end of this month, before we meet again.
Okay.
So yeah, NADC outreach.
Any further additions or deletions to today's agenda? Seeing none, can we get a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Councillor Cromwell. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Grilic? Okay.
I guess that was.
Motion passed 8-0. Next item is the approval of the minutes from the May 21st Committee of the Whole meeting. Are there any amendments required to the minutes? Councillor Chamzik makes a motion to approve the minutes as presented. We'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carried 8-0. We have a delegation scheduled for 10 a.m. and as it's not 10 a.m. yet, we will move on to item 5.1, action item list. This is page 11 of your agenda package. Are there any comments or questions from the action item list that was included in our agenda package? It's getting notably shorter than the first time we seen it, so that's wonderful. Reeve Hall.
I had a couple starting on page 12. The third one down is a tax recovery one. This is from June of last year, and I'm just wondering if there's a status update from administration on where that's at.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, actually, I believe that one is complete, but I'd be happy to give council an update in closed session as it's a land item.
Perfect.
Thank you.
The other one I had was we had the very last one on the page, CC 23701, regarding the remuneration of volunteer firefighters from last year's fire. Just a serious status update.
Madam Chair, I believe that one's done too. I thought that all the volunteers had been compensated, and then we submitted the cost to the disaster recovery program.
Thank you. Councillor Chanzik.
I also believe on page 14, CC 24201 is complete as well.
That's the county library board appointments. Right. Any further comments, questions? Action item list, seeing none. We get a motion to accept the action item list, receive the updated action item list for information. Councillor Wallach. Call the question. All in favor? Motion carried 8-0. Next item on your agenda is the CAO update found on page 17 of your agenda package. Are there any questions or comments regarding the CAO's update? Councillor Holland.
Thank you. Just curious on a couple of things. There was mention of a Pine Grove meeting with concerned residents. Are we able to share what the concern was?
Yes, Madam Chair. That was a request from residents in Pine Grove subdivision north of the river through Councillor Wallach and Reeve Hall. And they had some local crime in the area and one particular property that appeared to be the source of the crime. And so Councillor Wallach, Reeve Hall and Chief Shalapai attended from the county. Was attended by a number of residents and the RCMP. Very productive meeting. We learned a lot about what the problem was and yeah, I think that there's a shared understanding that everyone needs to pitch in to help out these residents. There are some very real issues. Unfortunately, sometimes the law doesn't help us solve them, and that's what came out of some of the answers. The RCMP knows about the problem and is doing everything they can, but when someone really is intent on being on the other side of the law, the RCMP has a hard time. So that's what the meeting was about, and it was well attended by the residents.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. If I may
Continue.
continue, just made some notes here. The lawsuit meeting for the multiplex, I don't think we can probably discuss it here, but is that something?
I would be happy to brief council in closed session.
Thank you. I think. Not mistaken, that's all. No, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, can we get a motion to accept the CAO's updated information? Counselor Chamzak. Call the question, all in favor? Motion carried 8-0. Next item on the agenda is the department updates. We'll start with the Corporate Services Department update on page 19 of your agenda package. Any questions for administration? Paul.
On page 20, we've got a grant in progress for the community transportation bus. I'm just wondering what's the deadline for the grant and when do you expect to receive the letter of support from our regional partners?
Excuse me, Madam Chair and members of council, the letter of support is actually in the town's agenda this evening. So we're hoping to hear sometime tomorrow what the outcome was. And I am not 100% sure when the deadline is, but I will certainly follow up and I can update council on that.
The other second question I had was, well, first of all, a compliment on the middle page 22, the middle grid on the reduction on the overall accounts receivable position, greater than 30 days. On the very bottom grid, can you just share with us what actions admin is taking to collect the over 90 and to get on top of the 30 to 60 day accounts?
Madam Chair and members of council, are you referring, recall the
Accounts receivable
accounts
on
receivable?
page 22, bottom grid.
My understanding is for any utility receivables after 90 days, we do send them letters after 30 days and then follow up with more letters, and then that goes to the taxes. The receivables, my understanding is that we continue on with letters. At this point, we don't have a collection process or an agency. We have been talking about that internally, but it's just follow up on the receivables just with letters.
Do you have is there a plan underway to develop a program a policy to provide clarity on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, yeah, that's what, it's becoming more normal for municipalities to use a collection agency. But really, that's been the last resort to municipalities, but we're both used to a system like that, so we're absolutely willing after 90 days to turn accounts over to a collection agency.
Any further questions about the corporate services update? Counselor Gerlich.
For some of the commercial water haulers that have some of the big accounts, in a lot of other municipalities, they generally have to buy their water in advance, pay for it in advance, and then pick it up as opposed to being chased for it. Is there any appetite for maybe changing our approach to this?
Madam Chair, we're absolutely open to making interim improvements, but we've actually been spending more of our time concentrating on council's motion for us to transfer all these operations over to the Water Commission. So, I mean, we can continue to make interim improvements to our system, absolutely, but most of our efforts have been towards transferring the whole works over to Water Commission. But we're more than willing to make interim improvements if council wants to.
Any further comments about the corporate services update? Counselor Holland.
Thank you. Just curious, on page 21, we've got a new balance or for the actual costs for the Jackfish Lake fire, and I probably can't be discussed here, but I just throw the question out. Has it been determined how the fire was started? And will there be any further recovery from that particular situation? Or if that is an option?
CEO, did you?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I thought that we presented the Jackfish Lake after action review to council recently. That's as recent the information that we have. There's nothing more than that. We're happy to get Chief Shalapai to provide council a briefing, perhaps in closed session if he's got more information.
Thank you. Okay. I noticed on page 23, it mentions significant updates for policy review is being required.
Page 23 is the next director.
Oh, pardon me. Yeah. Thank you. I'll leave it for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Were there any further questions about the corporate services update? Seeing none? Okay, Counselor Holland, we'll come to you for the community and protective services.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I've got notes on different pages here. So mentioned on page 23, there's significant updates required for policy review. So I'm just curious, being that it is a call of the chair for the meetings, is there an administrative suggestion on when the next policy review meeting may be beneficial? Or would this be, you know, if there's, I hate to call a meeting and then end up nobody being ready for one.
So you're talking about the second bullet point under a few of the projects that are being worked in? On page 23.
Madam Chair, as you will have noticed, we bring a lot of policy review directly to committee of the whole or council. So if you want policy review committee in addition to that, we're fine with that. But it's working by bringing items directly to council. If council wants more policy committee meetings, we're happy to do that too.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's something that we should look at with regards to just adding policy review to committee of the whole rather than having a separate committee for it altogether. As you mentioned, it's working very well. So hopefully we can look at changing that up as well. And I just want to make sure to go into another one here, page 23. We did that one, updates. I'm not sure. Baptiste Lake Fire, Baptiste Lake Department remains on Kitech, even though Richmond Park Caslin transition to Parkland Dispatch. Is that something that's going to happen with Baptiste Lake here soon?
Yep, for sure. It's a work in progress.
That's all for now. Any further questions about the update from Community and Protective Services? Okay. Fine.
Just came across one more quick question. I think it's great community transportation's being helping out with the AU convocation in June. I was just wondering if that was a donation in kind or if that is a rate that's being charged for that.
Madam Chair, yes, they'll be charged the regular rate, just like any other group.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Refall.
I just want to point out the above average building permits for this year. I think that's a positive sign and something that we want to celebrate, and sometimes because it's just in these reports, we read it and mark it off mentally, but it doesn't maybe get the public attention that it deserves. So it's just nice to see the number of development permits and above average building permits.
Any further questions before we move on? Seeing none, you're a quiet crowd today. Next would be on page 34 of your agenda package, the Infrastructure Services Department update. Counselor Mintz isn't here today, so who wants to take his questions? Counselor Cromwell.
I just would like to vote that we give him a double allocation next round. I'm sure he'll need it after coming back from his trip.
Reeve Hall.
On page 35, to the second paragraph above the shop fleet heading, there's a notice about bridge file 73010 received a 1 rating, which I assume is the worst rating. When, can you just give us an idea when prior to that inspection and the check, when the last time it was checked before that, and how quickly it deteriorated? Like, is this the result of the heavy traffic in that region?
Gretchen.
Through the chair to Reeve Hall, the last inspection was done January 13th of 2020. They were on a 4-year rotation since we changed companies in apparently 2022. They're now on a 3-year rotation. This was deteriorating previously and had a rating. And just simply due to time and extension, it has deteriorated further. We have actually requested core samples be done, and we're waiting back on a tender package for that bridge, as we feel that we could possibly deal with it in-house.
Okay. The second question relates to your comments about the operations and the division update on page 39, working to ensure regulatory requirements are known, and I applaud administration's work to bring all areas of the county into regulatory compliance. There's a reference to the Wandering River transfer site. I know municipalities tend to end up holding those because that was in the ID. That would have been an ID era site. What's the relationship with the provincial government on that? And does that make sense that all that liability transfers to our municipality and some doesn't stay with the province?
Through the chair to Reeve Hall, in the same way that we hold Collingtons, as it was previously with the iteration of the county at the time, Wandering River, when it joined Athabasca County, we hold the liability because it transferred with the ownership of the area.
Thank you.
Counselor Cromwell.
Thank you. I noticed of course, I just lost my page here. Bridge file 73210, page 36, Mountain Creek in the Wandering River area. They did some deck board and wheel guard replacement. That bridge is starting to separate from the bank, and a large amount, over 50% of the east shore has been completely eroded and has fallen off since fall to now. Is there any plan for the remediation and the saving of that area so we don't lose that bridge structure?
Through the chair to Councillor Cromwell, I do believe the local company that we use when we don't have enough in-house resources is on its way up there this morning.
Very good timing. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Garlick.
Yeah, back to that bridge that had the 5-ton rating. The change in routes had made some of the local people very upset. I've been getting some phone calls.
Counselor Garlick, can I get you to just sit a little bit closer to your microphone, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Snuggle right up to it here. Where was I? Yes, number of phone calls and requests for dust control on there and there are complaints. I don't know whether they're true or not about excessive speed of some of these trucks and whatnot. I imagine you got a number of the same calls.
Through the chair to Councillor Gerlach, yes, we did have to alter the route based on the bridge. The area is going to be getting dust control as soon as possible, weather permitting, and we have heard from many of the residents. We've also asked the CPOs to sort of monitor that area closely due to speed, and we are in contact with all 3 of the companies using it.
Okay, and so if there is some type of remediation taken on the bridge, is that a long-term thing or is that something in the near future that could remedy it or?
Through the chair to Councillor Gerlach, we are exploring multiple options, but we do need the core samples back before we can remediate or even put Bailey Bridge in place. Just because we're not entirely sure of the load rating capability, even to add weight of an extra bridge on top, so.
Okay. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Thank you, Counselor Holland.
Thank you. I think it's great the amount of advancement you've done with regards to the dust control. So there's a lot of people who are happy, but then the other people who are still waiting have questions. So the one question I had is the dust control product the same as it was last year?
Through the chair to Councillor Holland, yes, the product used this year is exactly the same as the product used last year. For council's information, we did receive a number of phone calls from areas that have not received dust suppression yet, explaining that we are not using proper dust suppression. They were informed that that was Mother Nature's dust suppression and not the county's.
Thank you very much. Are you able to give us an update on where we're at? It's Division 5 been started? I believe it has not, but that's another question.
Through the chair to Councillor Holland, I believe we were finishing up. And I'm gonna have to get back to council for sure on this, but I believe we were finishing up in 2 as of last Friday, but I don't have a current update on this.
Thank you very much.
On page 34.
Thank you. Counselor Wallach.
Just on that topic. This is obviously very late and I understand weather, but it seems like every year the dust control is just, it's too late after like seeding is done. Like all the traffic is in May. And there's a lot of dust from all the agriculture stuff. So can we look at moving it up a little bit, weather pending? Like, I know it's tough, but.
Through the chair to Councillor Wallach, we had actually hoped to be complete for the dust suppression program by the May long weekend this year. Unfortunately, due to the unusual number of frost boils due to a lack of winter snow coverage and the rain that Mother Nature has provided since then, we are very far behind.
Thank you. Counselor Gerlich.
Has there ever been a thought to doing some of the dust control real late in fall just before freeze up?
Through the chair to Councillor Gerlach, if we don't work up dust suppression sections based on the current product we use, you end up with ice sections by and large if we don't get a whole lot of snow coverage. So it would really create an unsafe situation. And that's why in the policy, we say we'll work up the dust suppression at the end of October. So it hasn't been considered to be put down because in my opinion, it would be considered unsafe.
Okay, that's a good reason.
Thank you.
And secondary to that, the shoulder pull that's going on in the area. What concerns me is some of those roads were only built 10 and 15 years ago. And we're into shoulder pulls on these roads. And in fact, the road in front of directly in front of my place was built 6 years ago and it's now 35 feet wide. And certainly it's ready for a shoulder pull. And I don't know if we're gonna be shoulder pulling the ones that we just recently built. We got a problem.
Through the chair to Councillor Gerlach, we are reevaluating in-house the situation of shoulder pulling, its benefits, its detriments, and its reasons. So we will be able to come back to council with the next major public works update day on what we see going forward as suggestions for 2025 budget.
One more quick little dig, because I would have much rather seen that fiber mat dealt with at Prairieville. I mean, there's chuck holes that are this big and 8 inches deep. And I would have. Yeah, and sometimes you hit two at once. And it would have been my preference to see something done with that as opposed to that shoulder pull that went on.
Thank you. Counselor Reeve Hall.
I'm just right. Isn't your house on a major gravel haul road?
Yes. Oh.
Okay. Counselor Holland.
Thank you. I also noticed on page 37, there's been some bridge sweeping or bridge decks are being swept at quite a cost. Can I get a bit more information on what that means and why and what all that is? Why that's happened?
So Through the chair, this is a new item for council to see. We have started with an in-house bridge maintenance team this year, as opposed to waiting for STIP and waiting for complete failure and contracting out at large sums of money. This is preventative maintenance and or maintenance that can be handled in-house. So sweeping of a bridge deck is very important because otherwise you can lose sight of anything missing. If it's covered in gravel, you might miss holes, you might miss rotting of different parts of it. So this is all being done by in-house forces.
Thank you very much. I just have one more other question here. I noticed also mowing won't be proceeding until all the hold harmlesses, which makes sense, are back in. Is there quite a list of of those documents we're waiting? I just noticed there's a few cemeteries, of course, that are requiring some help.
Through the chair to Councillor Holland, some of our more religious based cemeteries require signatures of the bishops, and it's been somewhat more difficult.
Thank you. Counselor Chanzik.
So on page 37, this is gonna be part of our somewhat regular reporting on bridges and stuff. I'm just kind of curious about some of the empty maintenance sections and so on, comments. Will we be able to see a list of that later on?
Sorry, through the chair for clarification, Councillor Chamzak, you're referring to like underneath the blue line, the first line in white that doesn't have anything in it in the comments?
Yeah, that and in the green with the where it says maintenance complete, the materials, and then the comment section and some of the listings on the bridge files.
So through the chair to Councillor Chamzak, you will see this document evolve as they
Okay.
finish things and get to them, but this is just a list to date of what we're doing. As we get to the end of the season, you will see it will be full.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Cromwell, and then recall.
Thank you. I did want to mention a kudos to your department. The Boyle Fish Pond area does look great. The photos don't do it justice. And also very excited for the landscape to begin here at the admin building and get that cleaned up. So your team has been doing a great job, and please pass that on.
Thank you. Recall.
A colleague's comments about the cemetery reminded me of a question I had regarding why the Boyle Municipal Cemetery is named the Boyle Municipal Cemetery when it is owned and maintained by Athabasca County. Last time I was there, we don't even have a sign that recognizes that it's not Boyle at all that has anything to do with that. Couldn't your crew get some credit for the fact that it's the Athabasca Municipal Cemetery, Athabasca County Municipal Cemetery near Boyle? I just think we've got a strange name and it does like, or at least a sign.
Madam
maintained
Chair,
by the
I don't
county.
think administration would be prepared to
Yeah,
answer that
Madam
today.
Chair, we just need a council motion. None of us have any background why it's named Boyle. That is the closest community, so.
Counselor Chamzik.
Just a couple questions when it comes to this small mowing. Is administration in any help, needed any help of finding some of those operators of those societies and whatnot?
Through the chair to Councillor Chamzak, no, we have located almost all of them. There's been some resistance to the forms in some cases, but the explanation that we will not mow without a liability form. So
I was headed to a meeting last Friday, and I gotta say, when I went past the fish pond, it looked excellent. Seeing a couple people out there fishing, and it looks like a great improvement in my opinion. Thank you.
Madam Chair, you might be pleased to hear that by reaching out to these people to get the safe harmless agreements, a number of groups have now decided to ask for more mowing on more cemeteries. So those requests will be coming forward.
Of course they have. Any further comments or questions regarding the infrastructure department update? Seeing none. Counselor Cromwell has made a motion to accept the department updates as information. You're on to the next item already. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carried 8-0. Next.
Madam Chair, our delegation
Yep.
is here.
Great. Can we take a 2-minute recess while we allow for our delegation to enter the room and get set up? And then we will return. Thank you. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. Next item on our agenda is item 4.1, our delegation from Mr. Joe Schulte. Welcome. We will start with introductions. To your right, we have CAO Bob Beck, our recording secretary, Ms. Blair, our communications guru, Mr. Schenkelberg. Behind you, we have directors Ambley, Whaley, and Wilkinson.
And good morning. Thank you for being here and welcome. Tracy Holland with Division 5, which is east of Athabasca.
Thank you.
Welcome Kelly Chamzik, Grassland, Prospita, Atmore areas in Division 7.
Morning, Camille Wallach, Division 9, north of the river.
I'm Ashton Anderson. I reside in Division 3, which is the Boyle area.
Welcome, Joe. Brian Hall, Division 4.
Good morning, Mr. Schulte, Natasha Kapitanich, representing Manuka, Collington, and New Pine Creek.
Morning, Joe. Joe Gerlach from Rochester Perryville area, Division 1.
And good morning, welcome Gary Cromwell, far north up to and including Wandering River area. Thank you for being here today.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'll now turn the floor over to you for your presentation.
Pardon me?
Please proceed with your presentation.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm sure you all know me. I'm Joe Schulte. I'm born and raised in Athabasca. I've been driving for the county for 43 years. And I'm here to discuss the minimum tax on our grazing lease. I like to pass around. Hope I got enough of them. It better describes each individual division of the acres. Got enough? As you can see, it consists of 13 different parcels, which they range from 2 acres to 160 acres. 5 are 2 acres to 22.4 acres, and the other 8 are 58 acres to 160 acres. My taxes in 2021 were $346.25, and in 2022 they went up
to $1,359.93 because of the $100 minimum incentive. That was an increase of over $1,000, which is about 300%. It's unfortunate. I did not divide this lease up this way. It's the way it was 10 years ago when we took the lease over from Mr. Goopy, which is no longer with us. He passed away a year ago. Our lease is up for renewal and I'm just not sure what we should do. Whether we should commit for another 10 years at this or if this could be in review. And I'm sure there are other landowners and leaseholders that have parcels divided because of rivers, lakes, and drainage ditches as well as I do. The only access through this lease is through private property, the Goopy family. And my only concern there is being that Mr. Goopy passed away. If the property is sold, I have no access to the lease. And I positive the county does not build roads. I'm sure of that, but anyhow, that's another issue I have. And yeah, our lease is up for renewal in October 31st, but they want to know like a couple of months ahead at least what I'm going to do. And that's about all I have to say.
Are there any questions for our delegation? Council Gerlich.
On Crown Land, any idea why they would have it broken down into separate title for small pieces? Because even if something is divided by a river or a stream or whatever, it usually stays in one title. Any idea why they have so many titles on it?
Yeah, and I question about that, if they could delete some of those smaller parcels. They said, yeah, but I got to fence it, but that's such rough terrain. Like we do all the fences on foot. We carry whatever we can on our back and go around all the fences. It's all river hills and there is a pipeline through it and a couple of small meadows. But apart from that, the perimeter is all done on foot.
So you would basically have to fence individual parcels.
If they take them out, I would have to fence it.
Any further questions? Paul?
Thanks for coming and sharing your concerns, Joe. Do you have any guess over what the value of your land has increased over the last 20 years compared to how your taxes have changed?
You mean the leased land or farmland?
All of it?
Well, farmland has gone up considerably in the last number of years. We all know that.
Thanks.
Any further questions? Councillor Holland.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your concerns with this with regards to the minimum tax. And with regards to consolidating those parcels, it's really not possible. Like you mentioned, you would have to remove the current fence and place it somewhere else. Is that accurate?
Well, I would leave some of the fence, but I'd have to fence the part that we're gonna delete if it's possible.
And would the Crown, is there any way they would consolidate some of the smaller parcels into one where it would leave your fence where it sits currently and consolidate some of those smaller?
No.
Because I understand that the rivers, the banks are quite steep there, so it's really not even accessible very well from the river.
Yeah, it's really rough terrain. You have to be in pretty good condition to even venture around that fence line.
Right. And then to come in through the private land only, is it a farm access road type scenario or is it just?
Yeah, it goes right down through the Goopy property and then heads out to the west and that goes down to the gravel pit that the county is apparently are going to reclaim.
And there's no access for other road or services at all?
Well, there's a road going into the sand pit that Glenn Jewell built when he put that sand pit on the other Goopy property. But that doesn't take you all the way into the lease.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Counselor Gerlich.
Would you be amiable to sharing what the lease costs you from the provincial government?
Yeah, certainly. Okay, in 2022, we paid 292.32. 2003, 517.44. 2024, 838.12. And I questioned this price and they said it goes according to CAF prices, so it can fluctuate up and down. Megan Washchuk is the lady that's in charge of the leases now.
So right now, the taxes exceed the lease cost.
Pardon me?
Right now, the taxes are higher than the lease cost.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none? Did you have anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Schulte?
That's all that I. No, that's all I have recorded that I can think of unless somebody has more questions for me.
Don't see any around the table right now. Because this is a committee meeting and not a meeting of council, the only decisions that can be made today are to accept your presentation for information.
I
or to
understand.
forward the item to council, just so you're aware.
Yes.
But we will be discussing this topic again, closer to the end of the meeting to decide kind of how
Okay.
we want to proceed and where we want to send it. So
Okay,
thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for joining us today.
thank you for having me. I should have did this a while ago, but I thought I'd better come and say what I have to say and see what happens.
Thank you. We will take a 10-minute recess and come back at 10:25. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order at 10:25. Next item on our agenda is item 5.4, which is our counselor updates. This morning, we will start with Counselor Cromwell.
Wow, thank you very much. Good morning. Over the weekend, we did have the seniors breakfast and fundraiser up in Wandering River, a very well attended event. Bunch of money raised for our seniors and for our fire hall. Very nice to see that going on. In the community right now, biggest concerns like everywhere else are road concerns and dust control. I know that your infrastructure director department's working very hard on that. However, that is a very common theme. And then I have been getting quite a few calls from some ratepayers about development concerns. You know, whether things are complete and approved or approved and operational. Some of these concerns were passed on to administration. And then, of course, the biggest elephant in the room is the tax assessment. As the assessors are coming out, and many residents have expressed their reluctance to allow assessors to come on their property and have posted that they are not welcome and that they have no right to enter that property. Remembering that these are privately owned properties, not owned by banks, but by individuals. And though this is a requirement of the MGA, I'm hopeful that maybe the director, and I should have asked during her update, would be able to explain a little bit better now that we're live streamed how some of that works, and maybe that'll answer a few of the bits of confusion and misinformation going around. Otherwise, the community is doing well and not much else to add.
Counselor Gerlich.
Yeah, not much to report, other than some good upstanding citizens decided to relieve the cemetery committee of all of their assets. They broke in and took 2 riding lawnmowers, the push mowers, the leaf blowers, the spin trims. The whole thing left with virtually nothing. And did try to steal some trailers in the area in order to haul the stuff away, but so that was not very pleasing to anyone. And we've had some improvements and upgrading done to the senior center, which is appreciated. And that's about it for me.
Thank you. Counselor Kapitaniak.
Okay, well,
Can you use your microphone, please? Thank you.
I'm going to rival Reeve Hall for a solid report. I'll start with concerns. So as, I mean, I don't have to repeat that the Collington Bridge is constantly being questioned. I get emails regularly and I really know that we are staying on that and keeping it forward and priority focused. The New Pine Creek Road, I was happy to hear a report that thank you to the diligent work of administration, that some oil companies and other parties have done some remediation and will be taking some responsibility, which is really great because the people that are on that road put up with lots. And so it's nice to be able to hear that and report back to them. For activities, essentially in May, I attended a Chamber of Commerce meeting that started planning the Moonlight Madness celebration. And ideally, I'm not a member of the chamber, but it was open to all business owners in the public. And I thought that it was really well attended and that there were many good ideas about how to promote business locally and how to bring attention to businesses that are outside, specifically the town of Athabasca, and allowing them to come into other businesses to showcase. And that's the first time that I had somebody brainstorm that. So when that gets a little bit clearer, I'm going to report back because there are going to be a list of businesses that will open their doors to allow county businesses to come in and say, set up a table or whatnot. Like say you have a water hauling company in the county, you can come and set up a table with information at another business on Moonlight Madness, which I think is a really great partnership. I did attend the Rochester, New Pine Creek and Collington community garage sales, which were all fantastic and a really great way to visit and meet people. And I will say that when I was in Rochester, it was the Mother's Day tea and we had egg salad sandwiches and a bake sale. and it was wonderful, and their stairs were tragic. And then I read that their stairs got repaired, and that made me even happier. So that, again, great work, and I'm sure the community of Rochester was really happy about that. New Pine Creek was really nice to visit with people, and Collington as well. Just lots of traffic, and everybody comes because they want to see my house, which is nice. We had I went to, all our regular committee meetings, ARED, the strat planning multiplex meetings. I had a meeting one evening with Jennifer Pascoe from AU, helping her with ideas on how to organize the volunteer list for a convocation, which is tomorrow and the next day. And that is going to be extremely well attended. So look forward to a lot of people in our community. And I hope that you guys can be there and to greet people and shake hands. FCM, I'm going to be doing a completely separate report, and I'll put it in the agenda because there's just so much. There was so much, but obviously the highlights were being able to network with people from across the country, as well as be front row to see our federal party leaders speak, Trudeau, Singh, and May. And that, yeah, there's just a lot of information there to give you guys. So that's going to be in writing. Yesterday I mowed the Collington playground, and I hurt a lot, but that's what you do when you volunteer. Colin and I went out and whippersnipped and mowed for a few hours, and it was a really good exercise. But I guess it's just an example. This job hurts a little sometimes. I did send out an email just like 10 minutes ago for our activities calendar, or I should say events calendar. The Minuk homecoming is August 2nd to 4th, and there is a complimentary pancake breakfast in the Saturday morning. And if you want to attend the dinner and dance, it does require tickets, but I did send out the information that has been put out by Mrs. Paquette. And I think that'll be a really neat event. They're going to have an afternoon of jam sessions and, like, I think cornhole and all the lawn games and lovely things. So I wish them good weather, and I will definitely be in attendance there. And I'm just, I think that was about all I had, other than just writing out the FCM report. But it was a very big and long conference. So, and I really recommend attending, anyone that can attend. Both Councillor Chamsick and I had a good conversation after about going into something that you don't know what to expect. And you're kind of like honestly wondering if it was going to meet or exceed your expectations. And the value of information and the volume of information, I really think it was important that multiple people go, because there's no way one or two of us could bring back what we're bringing back. Because there's so much going on at the same time, but there's also over 3,000 people. So, when you think about it, there's 6 sessions going on at the same time. You spread that out over a group, you can get a lot more bang for your buck, I would say. Anyway, I could go on about that, but I'm not gonna.
Wonderful.
It's a good week to be here.
Thank you. Councillor Holland, you next.
Thank you. May 23rd, of course, we did our strat plan workshop, which was great to take a look back and revisit the path forward. May 24th, I attended the National Public Works Week luncheon, which was absolutely fantastic. The events that were happening and the smiles and the laughter that took place was a testament to a job well done. So thank you very much for that. May 31st, attended the community barbecue to celebrate our healthcare professionals at the Riverfront in Athabasca. Put on by, I believe, the Rural Health Professions Action Plan Group and the Regional Health Care Attraction and Retention Committee with the Athabasca Rotary members, serving and cooking and barbecuing. It was delicious. The food was absolutely delicious. But thank you very much for all of it. It was bitterly cold that day, but there was a good turnout there as well. And it was so good to see so many people come out and appreciate our healthcare workers. June 1st, of course, we talked about the Trans-Canada Trail Care Spring 2024 grant cleanup, which we did in Collington. The next one was supposed to be the 15th. However, that will be now the 29th because of how wet it was, that it wasn't a good idea to go out at that time. And also the Twatna Watershed Group, not only did they on the 1st in Collington take out invasive species and plant native species, they did that in June 14th in the town of Athabasca along the trail as well, which was excellent. Again, June 5th to the 9th, the FCM, I'll echo the words that Natasha Kapitanik already put through. Excellent conference, well attended, very interesting, a lot of information. So again, that will be coming in writing. June 15th was the Northern Alberta Lemonade Day, and that is very cool. Came into town, we enjoyed some of the many selections of different lemonades and different foods, and I thought it was just absolutely amazing to see this program as being such an great way for youth on how to start and run and operate their own business, and they took it very seriously. I was so incredibly impressed with their food and beverage certifications that were being displayed, and how they were keeping ledgers. It was just awesome to see. I thought that was pretty amazing. June 16th, of course, we had great Father's Day celebration. So hopefully all the dads out there had a great day. Through the month, I also connected with many residents, and there was the main points that came forward out of the discussions, of course, as well. Carleton Bridge was huge. And roads were huge, people understanding, of course, weather and whatnot, but looking to get rid of that washboard was one of the biggest things. Trails was interesting, came up quite often with regards to non-motorized and motorized trails, which I thought was a real good mix and a really good conversation of what people knew and what they didn't know, where to go, and where they could ride, where they can't ride, and all of that kind of thing. So I found that was a really good conversation. Another one that came up was requests for improvements of communication and transparency, which I think is in every government agency. The other one was dogs, was huge. Got a lot of phone calls on dogs. Rundown and abandoned buildings was another one. Water rates was another one, and cell service and broadband. So it's the common themes that we usually hear about from our residents. So continued training and learning in disaster preparedness, more trail research, minimum tax research from today's delegation was interesting. Grant availabilities, cell phone and broadband research, spending a lot of time trying to find the answers that people are looking for. And then again on coming up, June 21st, the Athabasca Native Friendship Center will be hosting the National Indigenous Peoples Day at Athabasca Riverfront from 4 to 7. So bring your own lawn chairs. There's going to be entertainment, food and beverage. It was excellent last year, so looking forward to it again this year. And again, good weather, also hoping for them. And June 22nd, real quick, this weekend is also the Jumpstart barbecue hot dog fundraiser from 11 to 2. At Canadian Tire, and the Athabasca Classic Cruisers will also be there. And there's a first annual, I can't really remember exactly how it was, but it's motorbikes and mushrooms and something else happening in Perryvale on June 20, it's a camp out, June 29th, 30th, and 1st. They're doing a motorcycle parade, pancake breakfasts, and all kinds of things happening in Perryvale. Yeah, so it just came out. Bruno Wiskel is the contact for this. So they're going to be learning how to pick fresh mushrooms, and there's all kinds of a neat function that's coming up here real soon. So June 29th, 30th, and July 1st, I believe. But I'll send that out to everybody in an email. I just happened to run across it. So I think it's great that a lot of our little hamlets are doing all of these amazing little events, and we'll add it to the calendar as well.
Thank you.
Wow,
Counselor
that's a
Chadwick.
lot to follow up on.
You do.
I try to do most of my reporting in council meetings for committees. I attended the Strat Fund workshop, Public Day luncheon near the end of May. I was also asked by Grassland School to celebrate the kindergarten grade 9 grad and give greetings. I attended the annual healthcare barbecue. It was very well attended. Judged some stall signs for the 4-H beef sale as well. Did the cleanup in Collington for the Athabasca Trail. And to echo everyone else that went to FCM, I urge any one of my colleagues, if able to go, it's great to have a true small rural voice at these tables, and my report will be coming soon. I attended the Wandering River Senior Pancake Breakfast this weekend, put on by the campground owners in the area. Also brought Kim Lewis along, our seniors advocate, great way to have some of those great PR information handed out. And I also attended the Boyle Trade Fair as well. And then along with my various meetings such as FCS, Boyle Library Town, and Northern Lights. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Wallet.
Well, everybody almost talked about what I did already. So attended the NEDC meeting with Tanya Yao. He's the parliamentary secretary for small business and economy or something. It was a very small meeting. They had 3 sessions through the day, so it was very intimate of like one-on-one talks with a lot of people, and there was people from Whitecourt, Manning, and then Athabasca was in our group. So it was good conversation. Everybody's kind of got the same issues as we do. And we'll talk more about that later.
Thank you. I'm gonna go before Rachel. So, I attended the senior symposium in Boyle earlier this month, and I just want to say I didn't get to stay for the whole day, but there was a fantastic presentation by Sergeant Paprese about cybercrime and scams and what to watch out for. And I didn't know that somebody could present so well, have the audience so captivated on such a topic and laughing all while learning. Like, it was so informative. Kudos to Sergeant Paprese for putting that together, and to our FCSS team for hosting the senior symposium events. It's been some incredible feedback from those. During the last month, I've spent a lot more time talking to county residents, Caslin and Boyle area specifically. There's been few people who actually reached out to say thank you to the county's infrastructure team for the repairs that they did in front of the post office in Caslin. It's nice that there's nobody tripping on the street anymore. It was quite bad, and they addressed it so incredibly quickly. So thank you very much to your team. Some of the other concerns I've been hearing about a lot really surround around communications and wanting to be able to find information on different topics on the county's website and not relying on Facebook quite so much, or being able to, when they hear something on Facebook, being able to find maybe the correct information, on the county's website. So some things like that. Some concerns about dogs and community standards. Again, I'm sure Councillor Holland was hearing the same thing. It's just different areas of the county. There's some requests for signage and some care or attention to be put to county beaches and rec properties that will be coming forward, I believe. So looking forward to seeing that, but just a lot more recognition of how beautiful our community is and how many people don't even know all the different amenities that we do own and provide to the public. So it's been wonderful. Of course, lots of concerns about road conditions and people who understand that Mother Nature has been less than cooperative lately, but would also love for quatters to quit ripping donuts in the middle of the road the day after the grader does finally come, which is understandable. Not really sure how much we can do about it, but try. And I just want to recognize that July 1st will be 2 years that the Boyle Hospital has been closed at night. And really hoping to, I'd like to suggest that we consider doing something to recognize that and recognize the staff that are still there and working and trying to provide the best quality of care to our community members. Even though I know that they sometimes worry about what the future of the facility and the service there looks like. So I also had breakfast in Grassland yesterday, and I didn't know that breakfast took 4 hours, but it was wonderful getting to visit with so many people that otherwise I will pass. An omelet, of course.
Didn't take 4 hours to make it, so.
Don't order that.
I was attended the equipment rodeo like a number of other folks here, and I think it was great to observe the cultural shifts that are occurring in the CAO's team as the people that are building relationships. I think that's important, and part of that progress we've talked about to being an employer of choice, and one of those things is having people talk to each other. I had the pleasure of being able to speak at the senior symposium to deliver greetings and use the opportunity to very briefly brag about a few of the things that our council is accomplishing in the region and share some of those highlights. So I'm just gonna put check marks so I don't repeat these for you. I've had, some discussions recently and more kind of potentially coming up with developers about housing in the region generally, cost to build, cost to service. I know Director Whaley connected with some folks that seem very interested in further exploration in the region generally. And that relationship is really something that's transferred and passed on to the town, but I was part of a conversation yesterday with the president of that organization, and they're here and looking at that because of the work of the county administrative team. So I think that's something we can be proud of, and as we hand that off to our neighbors, because I think that's probably the place they'll look to build. And I think we all kind of recognize that housing is one of the major pinch points for economic development and growth in the region, and it's important we continue to look at ways and what our role might be to help alleviate that or encourage development. I've had, like everyone, I think, some calls regarding the condition of the roads. Some of it is frustration over the impact of the weather. And some of it is concerns around the perception that we've got oil field activities that are outside the road use agreements. And I think that's something that I've encouraged those people to direct it to the proper folks at the infrastructure department so they can take the details and at their discretion send out peace officers to check. It's exciting to see convocation back in the region and bringing people here. So this is usually a backwards looking conversation, but so tomorrow I will am scheduled to deliver greetings on behalf of the region to convocation, and Mayor Belay will do the following day. Friday of last week, I was at the North Alberta Elected Leaders meeting in Fox Creek, and I'll bring a report to the report section of our council meeting in the future, just once I've got my notes clarified. I've heard a little bit about the Collington Bridge, just because of where I reside and the people that tend to call less, but it has come up. And it highlights for me, I think, the need for us to communicate the reasons that STIP funding on projects like this are critical, given the ability to use 75% grant funding and the $6 million opportunity cost of not using grant funding. And I think we have to continue to work to communicate that. I think we all are aware, so we're still waiting for the official emails from the ministry, but the STIP applications for the Collington Bridge and the Alpac Bridge, which were two that we submitted, were unsuccessful. The Boyle Hospital discussion, I agree with the chair that it would be nice for us to draw some attention to the ongoing closure of the Boyle Hospital. We're 8 days or 6 days from being 2 years. And that's a big deal in our community, in our region. And so I know a lot of the time we allow, we have Mayor Durko's the spokesperson and is kind of out front and center on that for our residents to know that it's not something that's off our agenda or something that we've forgotten about as a group, and how critical that is. Janet Barclay from Alberta Health Services called me on last week, and part of that conversation related to the internationally educated nurses, that the transition from their home country to rural Alberta has been more challenging than even they anticipated, and required more resources to help them be successful. And so there's still work, and there's still lots of learning. I know for me, one of the real big lessons at the beginning when we first heard about this announcement was, I think we all hoped it would be 3 months, 6 months, we'd have something together and be back in business. And as much as I think that was still a good path to have taken, we probably should have kind of ran two parallel plans. The second one being a multi-year plan that said we should be considering maybe investing in LPNs and with some scholarships and some encouragement to take people who are already here and encourage them to upgrade their skills through the bridging programs that are offered through Athabasca or the University of Calgary, Portage, all those places, and bridge their LPN to a registered nurse qualifications. I did speak with Mayor Durko yesterday and Deputy Reeve, and we thought it might be nice near the 30th or the 28th, I think, because that's a Friday, to show up at the Boyle Healthcare Center, maybe with some coffee and some cookies or something, just to try to help build morale and encourage the folks that are still working hard there. I did attend the Pine Grove. So on the hospital thing, I'm hoping that we will see a delegation from AHS at our council meeting in the near future, just to give us a little bit of an update on what they're doing, so that everybody is the same information and is able to be knowledgeable about that. As has been mentioned in the CAO report and with Councillor Wallach, I attended a meeting in Pine Grove. And I think there's some of information that came to us there is probably better suited to a closed session discussion because of the personal privacy concerns. I can share a small amount maybe with some of the emails, but it's heartbreaking to hear from residents, and a big portion of that neighborhood, I think, was at that meeting, where they are afraid to use their yards. They're afraid to go outside at night. They're afraid to leave things in their vehicles because somebody will be in their yard, wrecking their door, stealing from their car. For years, the property that is a consistent problem, according to the proponent for the group, who is quite honestly afraid that if her name is known or his name is known, they'll be targeted even more. But for years, these folks have consistently trespassed, stolen, threatened violence against and further bullied our neighbors. In the warmer months, there are tent encampments. In the there's garbage and drug paraphernalia on the walking trails, making it unsafe. They are reaching out to the RCMP to scan, and there's a dog problem at the site. It's really a terrible and pressing issue that I think deserves more of our attention. And so in consultation with the CAO, I think we need to find a way to provide more detailed information to council, because I think, in fairness to the residents there, I don't feel good sharing all the things we learned in an open session. I think that's it. Now, Councillor Minns usually will tell you a lot about water commission and water those things, and I'll tell you that I'm certainly glad that to have work with someone so passionate about water on that committee. There's a number of meetings planned through the commission in the next couple of weeks. The commission has been invited to go present in the MD of Opportunity about the potential to work with them for fresh water and clean water. I've reached out to Chief Aluk of the Big Stone Cree Nation to see if his community's level of interest as well, to see if there's a multi-party group there. There's discussions ongoing with Thorhild County that again are still in the discussion stage, but where there's some potential to have conversations there as well. And the rest of the things that happen, you see through the regular reports at council meetings. So I think maybe before the end of the day, appreciate getting an understanding from council on your, our thoughts generally about the Boyle Hospital idea, if it makes sense to go over there, and to council to take over a box of coffee from Tim's and pick up some cookies, and just make sure the folks who are working there don't lose faith, because 2 years, for me, it's almost unbelievable that it's been that long.
Thank you. Just to touch on that, will that also be going through like the retention and attraction committee? Okay, just thought maybe that might be a good place
It's
for
so
recognition.
such a small amount, I think. Like,
Don't think.
we don't have time to organize that. Like, based on if I mean, to be blunt, if I planned things like 8 weeks in advance, that would have been a brilliant idea. This is something that kind of came up in discussion yesterday, and I don't think there's time to organize that.
Maybe not organized, but it'd be great if it was recognized as well through that, through the attraction and retention committee, it'd be great. Just a correction as well that I'd like to make on I pulled up the flyer, the Perryvale St. Thomas Christian Motorcycle Association, first annual Motorcycles, Mushrooms and Music Campout. And that's June 28th, 29th, and 30th. And then, yeah, so just that correction, I gave the wrong dates.
Thank you. Would you also like to make a motion to accept the counselor updates for information?
Yeah, I'll receive those,
Wonderful.
receive for information, yeah.
We'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carried, 8 no.
I'm saying you should add, council's been receiving a lot of credit
Can you use your microphone?
for the
Thank you.
drought mitigation that they put into play. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Let's move on. The next item on our agenda is item 7.1, draft signing authority policy. I believe this is started by an administration, so I will turn the floor over to Director Ambley.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of council. Before you is a report that is about check and document signing authority for the policy and procedure. So the reason we're bringing this to you is we want to formalize the process. The MGA does designate a chief elected official, which is a reeve, and any other appointed signers on behalf of the county. In this case, it would be the deputy reeve. I don't think there's a policy in place. In speaking with Leah, and I think in the past years, it's just been the corporate services director and the CAO. We want to formalize that process, and in this process, we also want to add the 2 directors. Should the CAO and I be away, we don't want to hold up the process of signing checks. We want to make sure that we can proceed with that. And then also in the procedure, we kind of outlined some of the best practices, such as making sure that the proper documentation is in place along with the check. And also making sure that if there's a check written, for instance, to the reeve, and the reeve signature is already on there, that the deputy reeve should probably also sign it as well, because a signer should not sign their own check. So it's just best practices. We haven't been doing anything wrong. It's just that bringing a process in place, will maintain some consistency.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions regarding the policy? Recall.
Interestingly, that was one of the questions that I had brought up, or I had recognized under 2.7 of your procedure, given that I don't physically sign checks, but if I go to mileage check, it has my name on the bottom and the top. And now that I've heard you, I understand there's a workaround to make that happen. There's a couple of things that I think under part 3.11C, I think the final word there should be or versus and, because otherwise that means that you need 3 signatures versus 4. And the way I read this is there's to be some sort of review of stuff that's getting signed. And, and I've shared this with the CAO that I have some discomfort that we have a 2 to sign policy, yet I can tell you that in the 33 or 34 months we've collectively sat here, I've never once seen or signed a check in advance of it going out. And so it makes me, have some concern because obviously there's a hologram, an image of my endorsement on every check, and it doesn't. This is a great improvement, and I want to congratulate admin on the work they've done here. And I'd be prepared to move the motion to move it ahead as amended when the discussion is complete.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions about the policy or procedure? Counselor Grillick.
Yeah, I think I read in there that it requires the signature of the reeve or deputy reeve, or it can be done by electronic signature or whatever. So isn't that a competing philosophy? Because if you do it by electronic, then it really doesn't involve the reeve or deputy reeve.
they would electronically sign it with our signatures.
Yeah. So then. Why would it be necessary? When it states that it requires the reeve or deputy reeve to do it, then you do it with electronic signature, they're basically not doing it.
Administration?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer. I think the concern is, when you're putting someone's, signature on it, I think that there's, maybe an implied, message that they've actually reviewed the material. In the case of checks coming from the county, the reeve signature is on every check, but actually doesn't get to review them. It's a little bit strange. In our observance, most other places, especially our size, one member of council should review the checks before they go out. So, we're certainly trying to look at that. It requires more time of the reeve or deputy reeve, but it's best practice to have one member of council reviewing the checks. So there's no harm in keeping electronic signatures, just so that that there's a review process to ensure everything is okay. Yeah.
Any further comments or questions? Recall.
Just one further correction, under 2.0, reeve is actually the chief elected official, not the chief elected officer, under the MGA.
Any further comments, questions? Seeing none. Reeve Hall has made a motion to direct administration to bring the check and document signing authority policy and procedure to the June 27th, 2024 regular county council meeting as amended for approval. And the two amendments are on the policy under definitions. Reeve is the chief elected official. And under 3.1.1C, it should read the chief administrative officer, CAO, or any director or designate. On that, we'll call the question. Oh.
Is this a
Councilor
recommendation to council that we do this? That we have
Yes.
to use that wording in the motion?
to recommend? Yep.
Thank you.
So to direct administration to recommend the check and document signing authority policy and procedure.
If it's as you first read it, to direct administration to bring it to council for approval, that's fine. If it's to recommend it to council for approval, I think you should not say to direct administration, because you can't,
Yes.
administration
That
can't
makes more
recommend it.
sense. It was not read.
It's this committee that's recommending the approval.
The first one did make sense though, correct?
To me. That's, as the mover, I'd like to leave it the way it's written with the words as amended in it.
Okay.
I understand the spirit of the motion. However, we don't have authority here to do anything other than recommend to council that we do this. So that's why I'm concerned about how the motion is read.
We're just sending it, just telling admin to take it to council. Put this on the council agenda so that we can deal with it there.
So we're going to recommend the policy and procedure be sent to the June 27th county council meeting for approval. As amended. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 8-0. Next item is item 7.2, strategic priorities update.
Madam Chair, before you is the report from Ian McCormick of Strategic Steps, who facilitated a session with council on May 23rd. I'm not going to read through it word by word. I think on page 54 of your agenda package, I think it's important to highlight a partial list of things that this council has got accomplished since election. since 2021. Five successes under strengthening our economy, 10 under investing in infrastructure in our environment, 7 under a community that cares, and 15 under effective leadership and organizational excellence. And this is only a partial list. Council's got an awful lot more accomplished than that, but those are just ones that were raised that day. And so they're part of the report. So you've done an awful lot. There's some time left in your term, of course, which was the purpose of the exercise. And I'm only going to talk about the ones today that are highlighted as high priority, which was the voting system that was used that day. Under pillar 1 on page 55, a high priority item was create an Athabasca County specific economic development strategy. Desired result would be reallocate ARED budget to county specific projects and increase non-residential assessment. And actually, there's no high, no high priority items under pillar 2 or pillar 3. And then you skip to pillar 4 and there were 3 high priority items. Those are listed on page 57. Review and update service levels. Absolutely. We have a lack of policy, which indicates to residents and staff what the desired service level of many services are. We need to take some time and document those and have council approve them. Another high priority item was we need to do some more work on our procedural bylaw. That's absolutely achievable. The next one was create formal contracts, or I think that should say or memoranda of understanding for all service and financial agreements. As we've talked about around this table and around other tables, we've got an awful lot of handshake agreements in this county and this region, and those are excellent. We've got excellent partners. But sometimes those handshake agreements don't survive either a change in administration or change in council. It's important for us to have formal agreements, and especially when a lot of money can be changing hands. It's surprising that that hasn't been raised by perhaps our auditors in the past. And then I'm not going to talk about the medium priority items, Madam Chair, but they're in the report. Lastly, there's some topics that maybe didn't get into there as high priority, but Mr. McCormick has left us with some things that he calls strategic thinking. They may not be priorities or action items, but they were raised. So this begins on page 58 of the agenda package. One of them was county as employer of choice. Council has repeatedly said that. Next one was diversity with an emphasis on Indigenous relationships. The next one, economic development. The next one, election 2025. That's an awful lot of work heading into that, going down the stretch. Certainly for administration and our returning officers. The next one, healthcare in our community, which you raised during your reports today. Still an issue. The next one, infrastructure maintenance and replacement. And the last one, reacting to government of Alberta policy changes, which especially in this last quarter was fast and furious. We've got a lot of things that have been approved, and actually I think we need a discussion item brought back to council to talk about the impact of Bill 18, 20, and 21 and what that means to the county. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any members of council have any comments, questions, concerns about the strategic priorities that were presented? We're all in agreement kind of on where the high and medium priorities landed. That's right. Councillor Kapitaniak has made a motion to receive the report for information and forward to county council for adoption. Councillor Holland.
Thank you. I appreciate all the information that was brought forward and during the stat plan. Of course, it was a pretty robust and fast and furious workshop. So of course, when you leave, you always have, oh darn, I didn't think of that, or oh darn, I wish I would have said. So I like the idea of having the strategic thinking added here. I'd also like to mention a couple of things that popped up. One of them being trails. We do have an action on our action list to bring a discussion item on trails and trail strategy to a future committee of the whole meeting after the ALT steering committee and the Recreational Trail Association present to county council or committee of the whole. So we haven't done that quite yet, but I'm thinking that that's something that we should be adding into this strategic thinking, not only for non-motorized trails, but motorized trails, especially considering Black Labish now has completed their intermunicipal trails plan in December of 2023. And within it, it mentions, of course, Athabasca County and Athabasca. It mentions staging areas in grassland and the Athabasca Riverfront, et cetera. So it's one of the things that I would love to see more discussion on as well, especially considering there's a motion in play to do that. The other items that I also came was a huge item, community standards and our hamlets. And we are always looking for ways to attract residents and to make sure that our service levels are where they should be, as well as following our own bylaws. And we have quite a few derelict buildings that may be something that would be a consideration of council to consider looking at demoing, whether that be adding it to tax rolls, really not sure exactly how that all should play out. But to clean up some of our hamlets, I know a lot of residents would be extremely happy to see some of these buildings that are attracting not so favorable people, as well as animals, as well as pests and all those kinds of things that are there. So I'd like to see something like that come out as well in our conversations for strategic thinking, and revisiting our welcome sign program. One of them especially being on 63 coming up through from Edmonton towards Boyle there at the Thorhild boundary. That's one of them that happens to be on my radar. So those three items, I definitely like to have more conversation about and how we would add that to our current listing, as well as where it sits in the priority.
Any further comments, questions? Rifa?
I think, when we look at this, the whole point of the exercise is to focus the attention on the highest priorities of council. And then once we've accomplished and are able to check something off, to keep that top list at the most important critical things first things first. And then once something gets marked off, to then move down and reassess what's the next item to come into that, let's say, top 5. And so even within these highest priority ones, I think there's further discussions around what are the specific actions that we're going to take to create a Athabasca County economic development plan, or to review and update the service level stuff. And I think I want to remind us that we agreed to pick our priorities, and not everybody's priorities are going to be at the top of the list, and we have to work our way through those things by giving our administrative team clear direction on the highest priority stuff for council. And so I'm hopeful that over time we collectively can have further discussions to expand on the blue colored high priority stuff. Because I think we recognize that while we're, even as an example, the economic development strategy one, our needs are aligned with the success of our neighbors. We also have needs that are unique to the county that don't necessarily translate to both our regional partners on that committee. And I think we need to have a great further discussion together about moving down a path to do some of that work that's internal and specific to us. And in the strategic, that section at the back, I think that's one of the stages that we will grow to, this idea of being able to react and talk about government policy and changes. As we move away from operations continuously, we have more time to talk about the impacts and take positions and talk to our residents about impacts of government policy. And so I look forward to days and meetings where we're able to focus on that, because I feel like today, my own personal view is that we've been a little more reactive to it rather than proactive discussions in advance while these things are in the committee stage. So that's what the other, I guess, there's some minor typographical stuff like council should be a proper noun, capital C's and stuff like that. That I think there should be no objection at the table to just getting that stuff fixed as when somebody reviews it for a final edit.
Under the strategic thinking and reacting to government of Alberta policy changes, it talks about working through our MLAs and partners. I would like to see it maybe identify that, it's not just through our MLAs or, through our regional partnerships with the town and the village, but also through the Pembina Zone, RMA, NAAGO and NAEL groups that we're part of as well. I think we can leverage a lot of our a lot of traction on items that aren't just specific to our municipality, but to Northern Alberta or the or rural Alberta in general through those groups. Any further comments, questions about this item? Seeing none. Councillor Kapitaniak has made a motion to receive the report for information and forward to County Council for adoption. Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Count is 7-1. And the motion passes. Next item is item 7.3, which is follow-up to our delegation from earlier today. Read Paul.
I guess I wanted to say I would be prepared to move a motion to accept the presentation's information. But council, in my view, is not the appropriate place to appeal taxes. Tax appeals need to go to the Assessment Review Board. And I think that for council to start considering a specific tax appeal at the council table is, I'm not sure is even legal, but is certainly, in my opinion, outside of our lane. Tax appeals need to go to the Assessment Review Board. And maybe the CAO or his team can clarify our specific role as it relates to that.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I must agree with the Reeve that that's the proper place to appeal your taxes is through the appeal mechanisms outlined under the Act. I believe that the landowner was appealing council's inclusion of a minimum tax in the bylaw versus his specific assessment of the land. But I could be mistaken. And the minimum tax is listed in the tax bylaw.
And so on that note, a discussion around the continuance of the minimum tax or not, to me, seems a discussion more appropriate for budget time. But I think it's important for us to think about some context as well. This is about 1,100 acres in this lease. Plus, like in total, I think this, under the control of the delegation, there's 1,500 plus acres worth of land, and the total tax bill for the whole thing is less than the average house would be in Pine Grove or Aspen Ridge. And so when I've talked to ratepayers about the minimum tax and it was been a decision that was made by council, but also I think it's important to think about it in the context of the whole. And as a group, we've worked over time to try to perfect things and to improve things. And I've come to believe that we're not going to be able to make a system that works for 100% of every ratepayer. There will clearly be some adverse impacts to every policy decision we make, and that we need to figure out how to get it right for the majority of people. And so on a 2 point something acre parcel or a 0.8 hectare parcel, I agree on that very specific parcel. The minimum is not ideal as it relates to that parcel, but when you take the step back and look at the total number of acres in the total tax bill, 1,500 acres and a little better than $2,000 is not an unreasonable tax bill in our region and in the province as a whole. So I think we should accept this for information as the motion, and to have a discussion on revisiting that policy decision that council's made is more appropriately handled through the budget discussions.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you. I appreciate the words, Reeve Hall, you've provided. I don't necessarily agree with everything you've said. Careful. So the way I look at this is we look at everything as a case by case basis in most scenarios. It has been a conversation that we've done quite often with regards to the minimum tax. People are not happy about it, and we are here to make things easier for agricultural, and we're making things more difficult. This is property that we don't have access to. There's no services to it. When you compare it to a house, well, it's not a comparison. There isn't a house or a structure or anything of the sort. It's grazing lease. I'm really concerned at how this discourages agricultural use. It discourages people from coming out and absolutely looking at those leases to say, hey, I can lease this for a decent price. I can get decent tax on it. I'm encouraged to come here and do business. We've given small businesses a tax incentive, and yet we're looking at our producers and saying, you should pay more. I disagree with that. I noticed, and I don't know, of course, there's a whole bunch of information, but in the Public Lands Act, and this will be a question more to admin, that we can't recover unpaid property tax on public land through sale of the land. So I'm not sure, how do we recover if someone chooses not to pay their taxes on Crown land? How is that recoverable? Do we have something in play there? I was just curious. I wasn't sure.
CAO, did you have a comment?
Yeah, from now, unless the legislation has changed, I can only talk about how I have done it. Been familiar with it from about 5 years ago. It usually resulted in problems with that leaseholder with the Crown, and it could result in their lease being pulled. So generally, if someone refused to pay their taxes, it affected them through the threat of losing that lease. And but you're right, you can't really put the taxes on the leasehold title, of course. So, but there's a different process, and normally those conditions of Crown lease, one of the top conditions says must pay taxes in full to the local municipality.
Okay, so that's good to know. Because we also sit back and we look at in some of the acts, we have Crown interest in property is exempt in whole or in part, which is typical legislature buildings and that kind of thing. But how does that apply to a grazing lease? Can they apply for an exemption? In which case there's a form they can fill out. They have to submit it before November 30th for the prior tax year. Or can we look into anything of those scenarios coming forward from grazing lease holders?
Madam Chair, my understanding is those are not exempt. They can't apply for that exemption, but I'm not the assessor. I think we did talk about having our new assessor come to a county council meeting to introduce themselves and have a discussion, and maybe we'll pass that question to them. They know all these answers.
Right. No, and that's fantastic. So back in 2022, when we discussed this, we originally were talking about a $650,000 revenue from minimum tax. Last year was 115, if I'm not, or 115, I believe last year, 110 this year, which is a far cry from the 650,000. We're looking at 10,000, I believe it was in today, just over 10,900 rolls. And if I would really like to know what the current roles that are being impacted by this particular minimum tax. If I'm not mistaken, there was different levels depending on how much the taxes was increased compared to what the minimum tax was. And we're somewhere around 2,000 rolls, I believe, is who is impacted by this particular minimum tax. And when we discussed it before, we were also looking at what it costs to send out a tax roll. And in our administrative report, it was $30. So when I'm looking at all of this and I'm calculating out, just doing quick calculations, we were trying to make things fair and equitable for all taxpayers, you know, so if you didn't, you know, quite have enough 77 cents on your 2 acres, Crown Land wasn't going to cut it. We were trying to make it more fair, but in doing that, we've segregated a certain group of our residents, and most of them are producers and agricultural, which we're not fostering what we need to see for development there. And I'm looking again at the $30 and even at $20. If we were to scrap the minimum tax and add a $20 admin fee, we would be well over $100,000 more in revenue than what we're sitting at now. And it would actually then become fair across the board for everybody to deal with what it costs to get that tax roll out. And then we sit back and look, okay, if that's what it costs, let's recover that money. We're further ahead. So I would like to see and really look at this again. I don't see this as being a huge success. I see this as being more of a failure. And I would really love to be able to revisit it and say, hey, there's a solution here that's actually more fair, would actually bring in more revenue. But that's where I sit with that.
Anybody else? Councilor Grelick.
I think at the time this decision was made, it was with a rookie council that was not in their seats for very long. And it was overseen by a CAO with little to no experience in giving advice to council to deal with this matter. And it passed with a 5-4 vote, which doesn't it doesn't seem like there was any unanimity amongst council. To me, it satisfied a bias rather than a need or a real purpose. We are responsible. Taxes create our income, and we need to be totally familiar with how our taxes are applied and how they bring in revenue. This went after 0.57% of our tax base, slightly over 0.5%. And in that, we affected 2,400 properties and we virtually doubled their taxes, 100% increase. It was absolutely maximum pain for minimal or no gain. At the same time, we're sitting there with 75 to 80% of our income comes from the M&E and linear tax. And we had such tunnel vision to pass this minimum tax that we didn't look at that. And at that time, our mill rate here for M&E and linear was 13 mills. Our neighboring jurisdictions, Lac La Biche was 18 mills, Thorhild was 24 mills. So the pipeline coming through this constituent or this county, they got a 30% cut right away as soon as they come into the county of Athabasca. And we overlooked 80% of our tax base and went after 0.57%. To me, it was one of the most expensive decisions that this council has made. It was, and it is not fair because you don't pass bylaws and things like this that segregate out 2,400 properties and treat them differently, give them 100% tax increase. Again, if we'd have implemented an administrative fee, it would have been fair for everybody. But that's what assessment is for. Assessment is to see that there's fair taxation. And we were originally going to start with a 250 minimum tax, which would have been over 6,000 properties, which means we might as well not bother with assessment anymore because it would have been over half of our tax base. This needs to be revisited. And I don't care whether it's budget time or whatever time it is. The fact of the matter is it's not big money. It doubled 2,400 properties from $50 to $100. I mean, people aren't going to pull their hair out and deal with it, but nobody's happy about it. They think it's unfair. Could you imagine going from 77 cents to $250, which was the first thing that was applied? And we actually approved that and based the budget on it. That's why we had to come up with $650,000. it was just irresponsible, and all that it showed was our lack of understanding in how taxation works and how it's supposed to work. And I think it needs to be reviewed, and just to kiss this off and say, well, too bad, that's not appropriate. So I'd like to see this come back to the 27th meeting or whatever, but be dealt with long before budget time, because again, it was something new that was introduced without any understanding, without any basic supervision. I can remember right at the time, I said, is our M&E not kind of out of whack with our neighboring jurisdictions? And the CEO said, no, we're right in there with them. So we ignored 85% of our income to go after 0.57% of the tax base. I mean, talk about blinders and. So anyway, I'm done.
Anyone else? Councillor Cromwell.
What is the current motion on the floor?
Paul made a motion to accept the delegation as information.
Okay. Can we amend that to and recommend to administration to bring this item back for discussion on the June 27th county council meeting?
Councillor Holland.
Thank you. Just looking at our procedures, just receiving it for information, we don't even have the power to do that at this level. We can recommend to council that we receive it for information. So our previous minutes and that kind of thing, these accepts and receives, if we don't recommend it to council and take it to council, we really don't have the power here to receive anything. It needs to go back. So I'm expecting to see it on June 27th.
I would disagree with you simply because we've received or accepted multiple items for information already on today's agenda.
And they shouldn't be. It goes against our procedure.
Councillor Cromwell, that motion would be competing, but you could make it after
Okay.
the vote on this one. Are there any other comments? Recall?
I mean, to close the motion, again, I would, reiterate the taxation is based typically on market value, except agricultural and some of the M&E, which is all based on a formula or a regulated rate. So the question really is, for me, is it reasonable based on the overall value of land? And for perspective, a vacant residential land of any size worth $465,000 would be paying $3,400 with or without buildings. And on, $1.2 to $1.4 million of farmland will pay $2,500 or less. Our producing ratepayers have obviously seen land values grow and revenues change at a rate that far exceeds the growth in tax rate. And I would, remind colleagues that some of the folks who first proposed this minimum tax later have chosen to speak against it. And that a 5-4 or 6-3 or an 8-1 vote is irrelevant. The decision of council is a decision of council, regardless of whether it's 5-4 or 9-0. I also think that it's important to remember that council did not overlook 80% of our tax base. We have in fact worked to fix the spread between our lowest and our highest rate through a measured annual change to the non-residential rates, which affects M&E, to grow that spread from down in the low 3.3 and to headed toward 3.8, I think this year. And I can't remember if it's going to 3.9 next year, but we have been fixing that gap. So I think that while a discussion around the minimum tax is not out of order, I think that it's inappropriate both here or even next month. The ship has sailed for 2024's tax year. This is a discussion that is properly handled at budget time when we get into the budget conversations for 2025.
So. The motion to accept the delegation as information, call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Count is 3 and 5, and that motion fails. Counselor Cromwell, you wanted to make a secondary motion?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend to administration to bring this item back to the June 27th, 2024 County Council meeting for discussion.
Can you read that a little bit slower, please?
To recommend to administration to bring this item back to the June 27th, 2024 County Council meeting for discussion. And I will begin discussion on that motion. I think though the ship has sailed for 2024, we definitely need to work on items, and putting everything off until budget time is not always the best way to operate. And we've had not only today, but since the inception, many ratepayers, many people that have been affected in a very strong way. And it is definitely worthy of our attention. This is why we're here to bring up items. Though we have made a decision in our past, does not mean that decision that was right yesterday is correct tomorrow. So I'm very much looking forward to revisiting this item.
Counselor Wallach.
I guess I'm just confused of why we're sending it back to council if we're gonna discuss it like a bylaw. Why wouldn't that come to committee of the whole first to actually have a discussion and then send it to council? Like, I'm confused on the process.
Counselor Holland.
Um, i- whether it's committee of the whole or council meetings, the debate shouldn't be stifled just because it's council. I guess we could have more of a robust conversation as far as being able to speak across the table and that kind of thing, or being leave of the procedure to speak more than once. However, we've had an opportunity to chat with it here, and I would think that there will be more than one conversation. I don't think it will be resolved in one. So the sooner we look at it, the better, considering we have removed any ability for an assessment appeal in a minimum tax.
Counselor Kapajaniak.
I just like to speak that I support this motion for the two reasons of being open to persuasion doesn't just mean one conversation, it means throughout your term. And I think that it is respectful not only to our delegation today, but to those that likely he represents, to give them full time and attention in a council meeting.
Counselor Gerlich.
Yeah, if maybe it would be more appropriate to discuss it at the next cow meeting, as opposed to the meeting on the 27th, because that's not very far away. And since our 24 is already concluded, so we don't need to rush into it. Just as long as we're going to do it in the near future, it would be adequate. So I don't know how you would accept that as.
If I may.
I would suggest that a conversation to bring back the bylaw to committee of the whole for discussion versus forwarding the delegation to council. But anywho, Counselor
I guess the
Collins,
thing
sorry.
that when I'm hearing, there was a sense of urgency from our delegate as well as to decisions that he has to make with regards to an upcoming lease, et cetera, that the further we push this, the longer it takes for him to obtain the information that he's required to carry forward. I mean, we're looking at a situation, again, we're looking at producers, we're looking at, a grazing lease, which is not comparable to regular land that you're going to build your house on, et cetera. We're looking at restoring food prices, and yet we are not helping in making producers more affordable.
Any further comments? Recall?
I guess I'm confused about what we'd even be discussing based on the motion. I think at the very minimum, we should be having admin prepare an analysis of the minimum tax, of its impacts, of what goes on in a more broad sense. But to rush headlong into a discussion where everybody rants and raves their own point of view without having had that other benefit, I don't think will serve us well. I think we would be better off to ask admin to prepare some work and do some analysis. How many ratepayers does it affect? What kind of revenue does it generate? What's common regionally? Is it the right thing for us? And give them some time to do it. I also think that it would be ill-advised to try to shove this onto the June 27th meeting. It's, number one, it's very close, and two, because we're heading into the beginning of July break, historically, that June meeting has already been quite full. And this isn't a time-bound discussion that's necessary to get done tomorrow. If it's something that we can give admin a bit of time to do some work on and come back, I think we're not under a time constraint, and so I would propose that we push it to the September 10th meeting, if not the COW meeting in September. Those are the 3 points I've written down.
Counselor Gerlich.
Yeah, I have a tendency to agree. It's unfortunate that someone is up against a timeline, but that's kind of just the way it is. I've been looking forward to using the opportunity to say it's already been baked in for this year. That's, as they say on CNN all the time. It needs a robust discussion, and I think the guidance from administration that we didn't receive when we made the decision would be much appreciated in bringing it back for another look, because hindsight is always a lot better than a lack of foresight. So I would like to see it come back, and I would like to see administration bring us back some robust information on it and some recommendations, because I'm firmly convinced that had we had a CAO with a level of experience, that there certainly would have been strong recommendations against going forward with it originally.
So are you looking to amend the current motion? So it's
I'm not-
currently reads to recommend to admin to bring this item back to the June 27th county council meeting for discussion. Are you looking to make an amendment?
Well, I
to-
just think June 27th is too soon, and
To-
maybe even the next COW meeting. I would agree with Reeve Hall that even September would be adequate as far as I'm concerned.
But as long as it's coming back with an admin report outlining. Okay. Counselor Holland, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I think September is a little too far out. There's the July 16 and August would be the August 20th, I believe. And I guess more than anything, the question returns back to administration as to how much time and their schedules and calendars would be able to accommodate this.
Madam Chair, next council meeting would be impossible. Our report deadline is tomorrow at noon. So to say it's going to be on for the 27th, you're not going to get a lot of information. We're just going to reprint the old reports that previous administration gave to you. So if you want something robust, it's going to take some time, and it affects our work list. So it probably bumps something else down the list, and that's fine. Council's allowed to play with those priorities. So it's going to take some hours to put this together.
Refall.
I would propose to my colleagues that either through unanimous consent or just by defeating it, we take the motion off the floor and provide a different view, which is to direct administration to prepare an analysis of the minimum tax and present it to council at the September COW. And again, we're not making decisions on minimum tax until March, April of 2025.
Counselor Cromwell, is
Thank
this
you.
your motion on the floor?
Well, just in retort, I believe that's very simple to make an amendment of the current motion and include a little bit more criteria and a date change versus removing a motion. I disagree with that. I think if there's an amendment wanted, I would support that amendment.
Counselor Gerlich, were you looking to make that amendment? Okay. Counselor Holland.
I'll go ahead and make the amendment. What was the September?
So the current motion reads to recommend to admin to bring this item back to the June 27th county council meeting for discussion. Your amendment to amend the motion to direct admin to bring this item to the September committee of the whole meeting with an admin report.
September 17th, yep. Or can we just make,
Summarizing the impacts of the minimum tax. CAO, would September be a reasonable timeline for that?
Of 2024. Madam Chair, yes, we can have a report for the September Cal meeting.
And Councillor Holland, you were making that amendment? I'm sorry. You were making that amendment? Okay. I'm gonna read this very slow, just to make sure that Ms. Blair got it. So Councillor Holland has made an amendment to the motion to direct administration to bring this item to the September 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting with an administrative report summarizing the impacts of the minimum tax. On that, we'll call the question. Oh, sorry, is there discussion on the amendment? Seeing none? Wonderful. We'll call the question. All in favor? That passes 8-0. The adoption of the original motion, which has now been amended to read to recommend to admin to bring this item back to the September 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting for discussion with an administrative report summarizing the impacts of the minimum tax. It was amended. Call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Motion passes 8-0. Did we get those? Both? Wonderful. Now move on to item 8.1, NADC stakeholder outreach. I believe during one of our recesses earlier today, there was a handout provided to everybody on this item. On page 3 of that handout, there are some questions for stakeholders. We're just gonna go through the questions. That's what we needed. Is anybody opposed to just going through the questions in this handout? Are we taking lunch today?
Yes.
Yes.
It'll be here in about 15.
Okay, so we'll get through the questions and then we'll take a nice recess. Sorry. Question number 1 is,
Can I
sorry.
interrupt? The way that they did it was actually question number 1 was question number 5.
Okay.
Because
So we start with question 2.
yeah.
Okay.
Lays the foundation for it.
Question number 2 would be, what do you see as the greatest challenges and opportunities for the economic development of Northern Alberta? What are the 2 greatest challenges and the 2 greatest opportunities? Are there different challenges and opportunities in your region compared to the rest of Northern Alberta? Comments, questions, feedback? Councillor Holland and then Councillor Wall.
Being that we're just seeing this document, we really don't have time to think really what our answers would be, or we've had time to do it. I find that this would be not well thought out at this time if we just rush into something we've just gotten a copy of.
Councillor Wallach.
I can speak to some of the discussion at the event on Monday. Of course, cell service and broadband was a huge thing. And then funding with banks, not funding, excuse me, rural businesses, because of lack of data. One of the topics that was brought up was, excuse me, you look at our stats, you see 100 people in grassland, but how much through traffic is there? Those data points aren't collected. So one of the suggestions was to have through traffic results brought to the table for investors. Because when they look at how many people go through grassland in a day or Wandering River, wherever, that's more than the population. So that affects the businesses. So that's where the banks aren't seeing the funding, the numbers for funding. So that was a big topic for that. The south is saturated. When you look at rail and infrastructure roads and stuff in the south, it's all over the place. We have nothing in the north. So looking at opportunities to create more transportation lines, etc., within the north.
Does anybody have anything to add? Counselor Kapitanic and then Counselor Gerlich.
Just what you spoke on, Counselor Wallach, would you agree that to answer, say, that question, the two greatest challenges and the two greatest opportunities would often have the same answer? Say our challenge is a lack of rail and a great opportunity to bring some in. Would that be kind of what we're looking at, like?
Yeah. Like challenge opportunities, like,
Yes.
yeah.
Counselor Gerlich.
I think one of the biggest challenges is in identifying the opportunities.
Yeah.
I mean,
Huh.
you can. We had an opportunity for something and we could certainly promote it, but we don't seem to be able to identify the opportunities.
Refall.
And I think this is an important discussion for us to have. I mean, these are not things that we're seeing the questions for the first time. They're not things that we've thought or just starting to think about, and this is the opportunity to have a bit of input. I think also, you know, based on some of the discussions I've been involved in recently, housing and the development cost generally is a problem. Why, as a developer, would you want to come and build 10 houses in our region when you can build 500 in the greater metropolitan Edmonton area where your employees are closer and your costs are lower and you can sell them and make more money more quickly? So I think to me, housing, I mean, that is one of those core infrastructure pieces that we need to work through as well. And are they different here than in the rest of Northern Alberta? I think for us, we have a lot of opportunities in the region because of our proximity to the capital region. We're not that far away. There are we've got significant employers in the region. We've got an abundance of natural resources through both the forestry and of course the Martin Hills oil field, which again, I feel like, and you've heard me say this, I think it's one of the biggest oil finds in our lifetime. And there's an opportunity there that we're just haven't really put our hands on in terms of encouraging that industrial growth to happen inside of our region. So I think we have we have opportunities that are different than the folks that are farther away because we've got a good mix of services in the region. We've got a good mix of retail, which is obviously concentrated in the urban centers, but we're also close enough to the city that if folks want some of those other amenities, it's not impossible to go get them and watch an NHL game if you can afford the tickets, or get down for those other cultural things. So for me, selling broadband's a big one, but also housing. The comment about bank data, we saw that probably about this time last year where we had a significant employer in our region struggling with the rejection by a Toronto-based bank simply because of where they were. Not because of their business model, not because of their success. They just didn't like our region.
I would argue that it's not just our proximity to the capital region, but also to Fort McMurray. And I mean, I've talked to many people who now call Wandering River home because it lessened their commute by 3 hours and they have that lifestyle and can still go back and forth to work. So I don't think it's just one end of our municipality that's closer to Edmonton, but also the other, realizing that the other is also closer to Fort McMurray.
That was a point I wanted to make, Chair. Thank you very much. The difference in drive time from Rochester area to north of Wandering River is vastly different in what can be considered a day trip for some families to others. And Fort McMurray being the gateway to that north region is very important for us as well, not just a capital region of Edmonton.
Any further comments to add for what do we see as the greatest challenges and opportunities? Councillor Gerlich.
Since in the past 30 years, like going back to the mid-90s, property values like in the south part of the county were pretty minimal. And I would estimate that land values have gone up 500% in the last 30 years, maybe even more. And that's exactly right. The taxes haven't kept pace, and that our taxes are low right across the board. And that was one of the things I first advocated when I got on council. I said that things are just way less than they should be. Like when you can sell 4 bales of hay and pay your taxes off a quarter section, there's a problem. But I think those opportunities have moved this way, like with bringing up the land prices, and they've gotten that much more expensive closer to town again. So we should be kind of on the cusp of being a welcoming place for things to happen. And it's just got to be the housing is as you would think would have to be the most important thing. I know there's companies that want to do some work around Athabasca here, but they need 15 houses for staff. And I think that's maybe one of the directions we got to be leaning, is somehow figure out how we're going to get something going in our communities to accommodate people. Housing is short everywhere. So if you provide some housing, you'll get those people coming here.
Can I follow up on the council's comment, just to say, like, generally, we're still a relatively affordable region if you compare to buying a house, say, in Beaumont. You know, what you'll buy here for a used housing stock, new is difficult. I spoke to a developer a couple of Fridays ago, and he said for him to, in town where the services are at the edge of the next phase, it's going to cost him $120,000 a lot to bring in services before he factors in what he paid for the dirt. And that's a real challenge. But if you're looking at a used house, in Boyle, there's some fantastic deals right now. And even in Athabasca, I think relative to, in a previous career, I used to say to my colleagues, because we were all on the same salary band, I can have a better lifestyle for the same money as the people I worked with in the city, because my home was cheaper, my commute was maybe physically slightly longer, but certainly much shorter in terms of time. Like my golf membership was a fifth of theirs. It's an affordable place to be, is where I'm headed.
Any further comments on this specific question? Let's see. Let's move on to question number 3. What support does Northern Alberta need from the government of Alberta to accelerate economic development, specifically in the following areas: recruitment and retention of critical occupations, infrastructure which supports economic development, including economic corridors, and attracting and retaining small business? Well, who wants to bring up the STIP program first? Councilor Wall.
Okay, well, that was talked about. For recruitment and retention, they did have a program last year called Reside for physicians. And it was based on where you were going to work, how much money you would get. It wasn't super successful because they only ran it for 1 year. So I think if they could bring that back, we did get 1 doctor through that program here. And then we talked about our housing situation with the doctors, how that shouldn't be the municipal's responsibility, blah, blah, blah. And helping them, like, I guess, find solutions for housing within AHS and Alberta Health. Kind of jumping to the next question that talks about the bursaries, and we talked about youth coming back to Northern Alberta. There's a Northern Alberta bursary program. The county line is a cutoff for that. So a lot of people that were there that had kids didn't know about these programs. I received it when I went to school, and my mom has received it when she went to school. So it's a payback program, kind of fee for service kind of thing. So helping them or asking them to do more education about that. They have all different kinds of programming for that. So that's for recruitment and retention.
Recall?
I think we've talked about this in the various times we get together on the recruitment and retention. I think, and you're seeing some motions with this, but training at home. You know, if we need critical professions in the north, And by the north, I mean anywhere outside of the greater daily commuting distance into the metropolitan areas. You know, training people who already live here is, to me, one of the solutions. The Lethbridge and Grand Prairie medical doctor training programs that are under development, I think is a good start, but also, you know, some of the distance programming that exists through Portage and through AU. If what happens, I think, in those cases is you end up with a slightly more mature student who can't necessarily pack their life up and run to Calgary for 4 years to train, but they can work through the distance-based programs and stay at home. And so for me, training Northerners in the north, and I think, you know, and my kids are not old enough to be in university yet, but when I look at friends who are, their kids go to the cities and they lots of times don't come back. And not that they don't exist, but you know, if you get people building a life in the rural region, they I think are more inclined to stay. Obviously, for me, STIP funding is a big one too. I mean, if we want to have infrastructure that supports economic development, road and bridge infrastructure, water line infrastructure, all critical, and electrical corridors, that transmission corridors. And then the small business piece, I don't know how you, the table stakes are first class broadband and cellular coverage. And today, I mean, there's moments where it's difficult to make a cell phone call from the parking lot of our county building, let alone, you know, where most of us live. That's a problem that we have to solve, or that needs to be solved, because you can't expect people to go into business if they can't communicate. That's table stakes.
Thank you. Councilor Wallach?
The provincial based gas stations that are being proposed was talked about as well, and how that will affect communities, and trying to work more with the municipalities versus creating their own, where infrastructure is already there versus creating their own infrastructure. So working with those small communities, I threw out the idea that Grassland should be the next gasoline alley. There's a lot of potential there, a lot of traffic through there. So trying to work with those through traffic areas to help produce economic and small businesses and stuff.
Any further ways that the GOA could help us to accelerate economic development? Not yet. Recall?
Funding and finding ways to help bring down some of the development costs. It's again, when you circle back to the we've got hello, Councilor Mims. It's
Good
great to see
afternoon,
you.
Councilor Mintz.
You might want to mute him just for now, okay? Until he knows that he's listening to some of the other our colleagues from other municipalities, you know, they were getting into the role either in partnership or directly as developers to get lots prepared and ready and selling them very close to their cost. We see if anyone who's driven to south of Edmonton recently, there's a billboard of billboard size advertising $50,000 an acre. I shouldn't say that in case anyone hears, but down in Vegreville, I think in Valley View, they're looking at selling industrial land like 35,000 an acre. And these are costs that, you know, you can't necessarily put the infrastructure in for that. But when you talk to those folks about how they're doing it, and they're being creative. In some cases, they're doing it themselves in their downtime with their own equipment, which I suspect may mean they don't value the equipment and the time and what the yellow iron's worth when it's being used there. In other communities, I think they may have had some grant money from the federal and provincial government that they just accepted as part of the project cost, but didn't expect to recover that through their sale price. So there are some creative ways we can look at it, but having government assistance to help get our costs to a place where where they're marketable would be helpful.
Thank you. Counselor Mins, we are just discussing the NADC outreach stakeholder questions that were distributed. And the current question we're on is, what support does Northern Alberta need from the government of Alberta to accelerate economic development?
Okay.
Are there any other ones to add to our list? Counselor Hall, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And for the benefit of Counselor Mins as well, just out of curiosity, it does mention here, the written responses be emailed by June 28th, 2024. So if we have additional ideas and thoughts, is that something we can take advantage of?
I would imagine that administration will have to submit our response. Like they'll need a little bit of time to do that, right?
Okay, so you gotta think fast on your feet, Counselor Mins, because we didn't get very much time with this.
And just for clarity, it was submitted around June 5th. So like it did come in. I double checked my emails, so like I apologize that you didn't have it earlier, but
So the fourth question is your organization aware of regional and northern economic development supports like the Northern and Regional Economic Development Program, Northern Alberta Development Bursary Program? Are there any improvements you would suggest to these programs or to other government programs and agencies that serve Northern Alberta? So this is speaking about the NRED grant that we've applied for, correct?
Yeah.
And then the bursary program?
The bursary program. So the Business Link was there. A lot of people don't know what Business Link is because they have no sites in Athabasca or Westlock. They're based out of Edmonton and Whitecourt. That was one thing that we brought up was Community Futures and Business Link having sites in more communities. And then, yeah, just people not knowing about the programming and what can be covered from the grants. And just a bit more explanation and stuff.
One. So just better communications around the availabilities of those programs. Okay. Anybody have anything to add there? No? Okay, let's move on to question 5. How can the government of Alberta and the NADC better support collaboration on economic development initiatives between industry, municipalities, and nonprofit organizations? Counselor Holland.
The government of Alberta, as well as the federal government, would really do well if we had local representation at the table. That was something that we talked quite a bit about at FCM. Where things are happening at the municipal level, it doesn't seem to be getting through as well as it could. So I would like to see local representation of municipalities at the table, both provincially and federally.
Thank you. Provincially and federally.
So I guess just a question, the NEDC council is made up of people from Cold Lake, Fort McMurray, Grand Prairie, Little Red River, Cree, at Fairview and County Northern Lights. What would you want to see different about that?
I would like to see it at all levels of the government of Alberta for sure. I understand you're mentioning NADC, but I was just basically like, again, we didn't have much time to look at this, but I'm considering what the government of Alberta is asking rather than NADC. The government of Alberta, in my opinion, definitely needs local representation at their table.
Okay.
would that be through better communication with the MLA and just more time with that person here? Or
No actual representative at the table. Pardon? The government of Alberta. When we're sitting down and having these, the government of Alberta is having these conversations. I guess they use the best, it was Australia as an example. They actually have the local municipalities at their table. And so when you're doing parliamentary, when you're doing all of the local representation is there.
Anything further? This item? Counselor Kapitanic.
I'd just like to maybe clarify that a bit more. Reaching out so that it doesn't feel like at a municipal level, you're always having to beg for an opportunity to lobby, but by having a committee or a place where all governments met, where municipalities were included, that was the example I know you're referring to. And what it did was create less of a almost competition between like who can get in the face of your MLA, who can get to this event faster and get their attention. And by having a formal committee that would meet. Now, obviously, that's lobbying them to create it, right?
Mhm.
But it's a really good point. Alright.
Anything further? Counselor Wall.
We did talk about continued funding for, not so much as a grant program, but just in general to municipalities to help with the economic development. Instead of having to apply for a grant every year, just having that built-in funding. So I think just sustainable funding is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. There's no further. We'll go back to question 1. How should the NADC define Northern Alberta as a region when planning for Alberta's economic development? What is your what is your vision for your region of Northern Alberta? What is unique to Northern Alberta that needs to be considered? Councillor Wallach.
My statement there was we're the new West. We have a lot of opportunity up here that is untouched. The South, like I said before, is saturated. So there's tons of opportunity. Our location, specifically in Athabasca, there's 3 huge major traffic like going north. So we have a lot of through traffic and availability to start to host and encourage more development here with oil and gas and forestry, etc.
If I may, are the buzzwords gateway to the north still being used? Because really that's what we are in this particular region is a gateway with like as you mentioned with all those traffic corridors.
So
The
like
issue
a
that we
really
have.
gateway to the north specific marketing strategy to market our region.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. And unique to Northern Alberta that needs to be considered is our really, and as you mentioned already, broadband and cell phone service. Without having, when we have so many dead zones and the distances in between and people standing on their roofs of their vehicles to trying to, trying to get some sort of service. We can't do any kind of economic development without proper connectivity.
I think the question is more on the positive side, like what do you see for the future? Like, yes, we know that there's no broadband here, but how do you see the future? What do you see in the future?
Councillor Kapitanic.
We said that there was a county that was investing in Starlink for companies and investors that would want to come in as an incentive, knowing you can't get anything else, like providing basically grants for the hardware, the just ideas, things that we could do. Be like, what do you see? Well, let's see. We found a way to. How do we want to be known as a community that overcomes that obstacle by finding a more creative solution? Creative problem solving Northern Alberta.
Yeah.
Thinking outside the box.
In terms of the vision, I think, we've got a lot of that. I mean, there's this amazing untouched opportunity here. There's space, resources, whether it's water, forestry, energy. The unique things though that I think we have to consider as we do things are the distance. There's great distances for all of us to travel that are, you know, I think hard to imagine for some of the folks that we all have friends with in the cities. And even the simple things like if I, as an example, if I drive my children to visit a friend, well, it can often be 45 to 60 minutes one way between my house and their buddy's house because of the kind of the scale of the region that we cover. And as much as I believe that in a lot of ways we're an affordable place to be, there are some costs that are different here that we have to take into account that just that are not, the lack of density creates additional burden for the north that we have to be aware of.
Anything further? Counselor Gerlich.
And the one thing that we really have to promote is affordability. I talked to a fellow the other day. He said he owns 7 acres with an old house and a horse barn on it. And he's looking at 700,000 to 800,000 for that. He's in the Highway South Corridor for those 7 acres, and he can come up here and actually buy something that is much better than what he's got, and still have quite a bit of jingle in his pocket. So that's certainly one thing that we do have going for us.
That sure made me move home when I graduated university. That's anything else? Seeing none, Counselor Wallach, do you want to make a motion for this item?
Should we then, because of the timing, compile this and so the agenda deadline is tomorrow for council, but is it possible to compile this and have this come out after the fact with the agenda in advance of the council meeting for kind of a review, a summary of what we've talked about so that everybody gets to see it there and has a little bit more time to think about it? Then there's a moment to revisit it and add or kind of adjust. But if it's mostly compiled, then the submission by the deadline would hopefully be manageable. Unless everybody's got holidays booked after the council meeting. Process wise, CAO, would that be create an unreasonable burden on
So
your team?
you would like it on the next council agenda? Is that really what you're asking?
Sort of a summary of the answers to the questions we've got here.
And the deadline is the day after. That shouldn't be a problem
That should be fine.
to have it on for the 27th.
If the
and-
motion is to direct administration to compile a summary of the
And
comments.
even if the summary comes out like asynchronous to when the agenda is released.
That's possible.
Counselor Wallach? That was your motion? To direct administration to compile a summary of the responses to be reviewed at the June 27th county council meeting? Counselor Holland?
See, these are thoughts that just pop up. One of the things that I was also finding that I would really like to bring forward is the accuracy of information that are on the government, both provincial and federal websites. For example, the northern, the North National Broadband mapping doesn't show accurately all the availability of Starlink, different satellites. It doesn't have that information. When people are trying to find the information to say, hey, what is available in your area? Go there. It's not accurate. So we're not accurate. They're not accurate. And neither is the province. So it's accuracy of information really is what people are looking for as well.
So that would be, how could the government of Alberta better support collaboration? It's just more up-to-date, accurate information. Okay. Wonderful. Anything further at this point? And again, we'll have that opportunity at the council meeting to add any last minute ones. So on the motion to direct administration to compile a summary of the responses or discussion for discussion at the June 27th county council meeting. Call the question, all in favor. Motion carried, 8 no. 9. 9-0, sorry.
Madam Chair, before you break for lunch, I'm wondering if there would be some wisdom in recessing the committee of the whole to open the council meeting, specifically to approve the agenda while we have all 9 council members here.
Madam Chair, that's exactly a great strategy. We have no need for a closed session for committee of the whole, so looking at the agenda.
What do you mean?
Yeah, you could simply adjourn committee of the whole and open the
There's-
next meeting.
There's still 9.1 for closed
What do we
session.
What do we have? That's closed session? Yeah, I just said we don't need it.
Oh,
It can be deferred. And Director Wilkinson is no longer here, who was
so
going to
can we get
present.
a motion to table item 9.1 to the next committee of the whole meeting? Call the question. All in favor? Motion carried 9-0. Thank you. Meeting adjourned at 12:21.
It is 12:22, and I'd like to open the special meeting of Athabasca County Council for Tuesday, June 18th. The first item of business after the call to order is the approval of the agenda. CIO, I believe you had a couple of items you hoped to add. 3.2.
Mr. Chairman, if we could add the acceptance of provincial grant applications for water line projects. That would be the first item.
That's would be 2.2, right?
Right. And the second one, which I've done an RFD for.
Do you want me to-
Oh, yeah, it was the advocacy letter for Highway 6320. And both of them were time sensitive. That's why we are respectfully asking to add them to the agenda.
Will you just bear with me a moment to look at my electronic notes? Okay, I guess it was just those two things. Sorry. Councillor Anderson has moved the adoption of the agenda as amended. Now, because this is a special meeting, the only way you can add to it is with the unanimous consent of the entire council, which is why it matters that all 9 of us are here. On the question of the adoption of the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The count is 9-0 and the agenda is adopted. I would like to recess for lunch for, how long are we going to choose? 20 minutes? It's pizza, so it will be fast. Let's come back at 20 minutes before 1. But now you're not obligated to if you.
We don't need to anymore.
It is 12:43, and I'd like to reconvene the June 18th special county council meeting. The first item of business, CAO, is 2.2, acceptance of provincial grants. Do you want to speak to that?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As council is aware, we were successful in a number of grant applications. Very exciting news for the county and partners. Rochester and Caslin feasibility studies for waterline expansion, as well as the engineering and construction grants, 2 separate grants for the Island Lake Waterline project. With that, we are recommending that council authorize the REIT to sign all funding agreements related to these grant approvals. And the reason it's time sensitive, we were required to get them back to the minister's office by this Friday.
21st.
So unfortunately, we did have to rush this, but we'll rush something for many, many millions of dollars. So it's such good news for the county and our partners that we're asking council to approve these motions today. The second motion is for the funds required for the county portion of the Island Lake Engineering Design just be taken from reserve. It was not in the 2024 budget, but by adding that motion, we're free to take that from reserve. We don't believe we will need any of the construction money in 2024. The design will take some like the time. I'm positive we'll have to include our portion of construction in 2025 budget for consideration. So, and those allocations are listed on the second page of the report, Mr. Chair.
Is there I'll just give everybody a moment to review that report and those numbers. Councillor Anderson has moved the first motion. Councillor Cromwell will second. What do you want to do the other way? First motion is council authorize REIT to sign all funding agreements related to the Water for Life grant approvals for Rochester and Caslin feasibility studies, as well as the engineering and construction of the Island Lake Waterline. Discussion on that item. Want to speak to it, Councillor Cromwell?
Yahoo.
Okay. Seeing that there is no discussion, it looks like you're ready for the question on the adoption of the motion that council authorized REIT to sign all funding agreements related to Water for Life grant approvals for the Rochester and Caslin feasibility studies, as well as the engineering and construction of the Island Lake Waterline extensions. All those in favor? Opposed? The count is 8-0, and the motion is adopted. Councillor Cromwell waived in a tie with Councillor Anderson that funds required for the county portion of the Island Lake engineering and design projects be taken from reserves. This has that budget impact. It wasn't in our budget. Any discussion on that? Seeing no discussion, if you're ready for the question, does everyone feel they've had enough time to think that through? On the question of the adoption of the motion that funds required for the county portion of the Island Lake engineering and design projects be taken from reserves, all those in favor? Opposed? The count is 8-0, and the motion is adopted. I think there's already motions on the floor kind of directing the negotiation with the partners on the split, so we don't need to deal with that. The second item.
Second item, Mr. Chairman, is to ask council to support and authorize a letter, basically to authorize the REIT signing a letter advocating for twinning of Highway 63 as per the letter of request from Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo. Obviously, this This would have some impact on landowners in our region. But the overall impact would be absolutely fantastic for our region and for a lot of our neighbors to continue that twinning south of where it has ended. And we're asking for council to authorize sending a letter of support as per the request of Wood Buffalo.
Someone wants to move that? Councillor Gerlich has moved the council support and authorize a letter advocating for the twinning of Highway 63 per the letter request from the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo. Discussion. Councillor Holland, you were first on the list.
Thank you. I just was hoping to gain clarity around one particular word that popped out for me on the letter. It is in the fourth paragraph, second from the bottom, and it says, the highway route is well established for the movement of passengers and goods and twinning Highway 63 and Highway 28 from around grassland. What does around grassland mean? Does it mean through grassland, or are we bypassing grassland? Are we making it look like Edson? That's just really concerned me, because I thought if they're going around.
Mr. Chairman, I'll defer to Deputy Reeve Anderson, who has her hand up.
Floor is yours.
I know when this item was previously discussed in the community, it was a pretty contentious topic. Especially in the Boyle area, people worried that the twinning of the highway would really take a lot of business away from Grassland and Boyle. Just as people wouldn't be quite having to slow down the same, the traffic patterns would change, the access wouldn't be quite as convenient. So I would not be in support of sending a letter at this time until we had a little bit more discussion with the community on.
On just addressing Councillor Holland's question, I think if you read the sentence, it's the route is well established for the movement of passengers and goods. There's a breath, it's and twinning the highway from around Grassland to Edmonton. So twinning the highway from near Grassland to Edmonton, that's the the way that's written. To me, the grammar means you're not twinning it right from Grassland, because it obviously starts to the northeast of Grassland. You're Atmore, but right. So I think the way it's written is the twinning starts near Grassland all the way to Edmonton, would improve the transportation network in Alberta's northeast.
And I appreciate the interpretation. I really do, but it's an interpretation and not a confirmation, I guess.
I'm
And so
sorry, can you
it's
say
an
that louder?
interpretation and not so much as a confirmation from the intent of where that construction is going to take place. So that around Grassland really raised a red flag for me.
Councillor Cromwell had his hand up, then Councillor Chemsik.
I very much appreciate the comments of the Deputy Reeve about the needs of Grassland and Boyle and how those hamlets and village can be affected. As I'm sure you remember, when the highway was twinned up around Wandering River, we lost the second entrance into the town site. And how prevalent it is now that the way the bridge is built and the way that was done, in speech with Minister Jean and Dreeshen, we cannot put a second entrance back into Wandering River right now. The design will not work. It was very apparent at the last evacuation of Fort McMurray there, that partial we had a month ago, that traffic cannot flow. I think a lot more study and understanding has to be looked at for the impact of the Hems. I understand the need and the desire to have a twinned highway, but I think there's a little bit more that has to come out through it as well. And, you know, it did have a negative impact on one community and made things a lot harder. Even from a business point of view, for the owners of the Tempo that is now a Shell, right? It completely bypassed all traffic away from one end of town where they had an option before, and it cut one of our taxpayers, one of our residents off. There's many things that need to be considered, and I would not want to jump in without having a better idea of the complete proposal, in my personal opinion.
Councillor Kavichand.
I recognize that this is just a letter of support and, sorry. Oh, were you at? You want to go ahead? Okay.
I didn't put my normal dot down.
That's okay, sorry. It is a letter of support. It does not bind us to anything. And I think that, public consultation is always a great, idea, but takes time to organize. With that being said, this is also a community that is advocating for another highway to be built north out of the municipality to go to Grand Prairie. And I somewhat feel it's a little bit of greediness. Maybe trying to ask for all the things in order to get one thing. I don't know. I can't speak for anybody there, but I feel like if the reasoning behind them wanting the highway out of the north is for safety and better routes of evacuation, then twinning this portion of the highway doesn't change that, and it doesn't improve their paths of exit. And so if I was going to pick one or the other, even though I don't support a highway out of the north, it would be make the most sense for me for safety wise. Whether this council chooses to endorse this letter or not at this time, my personal opinion is pick one or the other. Wood Buffalo.
Counselor Chamsik, I apologize for.
Yeah, no
I put
worries.
the little on deck doc.
Yeah, no, I think that there needs to be a little bit more clarity on the grammar, and I really appreciate all of council members that have spoken, value their opinions. And you're right, it needs to be a bigger discussion, looking at all data collection, how would that mapping look like, availability from management of rescue evacuation plans and all of those factors. I am in agreement with the deputy reeve right now. I'm not in support. Thank you.
Counselor Wallach, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. As this is just a letter of support, we just talked about growing our economy in this area. I think this would have huge impacts to us with the availability to move and transport things. It would free up a lot of traffic. And it's just a letter of support. We can fight for having grassland and not go around grassland or go around Boyle. Like, you look at Gasoline Alley, it's a 2 major highway and there's thousands of people that stop there a day. So I don't think if we did it correct, if we had input in it, I think we could have huge economic impact here.
Counselor Gerlich, did you want to address this? Well, there's only you and me left to speak, so, and then we can call a question, so I can make a comment and then you can follow up if you'd like. Who made the motion again? You did. Oh, there we go. So you can speak last. That would be appropriate. I think for me, there's a wild difference between supporting the concept of twinning versus negotiating the alignment. We're not talking about negotiating the alignment through anywhere right now. We're talking about the concept of twinning a highway through our region that will improve safety on the highway. When you, as far as I can tell, when you separate the flow of traffic, the highway gets safer. And for me, there's really no question around the grammar. It says very clearly from around grassland. It doesn't say twinning it around grassland. So it's clearly referring to an approximate starting point, not a, not miss grassland and skip Boyle and all of that stuff. So to me, that should not be the reason to reject it. The reason to reject it is because you don't support the infrastructure and the economic benefit that comes from that. I think that, again, given how far away this is, it's worth support, and we should offer that. And then if it moves ahead, like this is decades away, it's not in the 5-year provincial capital budget, as far as I could tell. We're years and years away from anything happening. There'll be lots of time to fight over where the alignment actually ends up. But the concept of, do we support the idea of it being twinned? I think we should be a resounding yes. Now, Councillor Gerlich, I did subsequently make a note that you made the motion and get the final word.
Yeah, just from my point of view, there are a lot of slow, heavy loads that go up there. And I just think would be much safer on a twinned highway as opposed to one lane of traffic each direction, because people get behind something and pretty soon they throw caution to the wind and there are problems. I can't see how it could really have that much of a detrimental effect on the community if it's done properly when going by.
On the question of the adoption of the motion that council support and authorize a letter advocating for the twinning of Highway 63 per the request from the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, all those in favor? Opposed? I didn't see, so we're 8-3, so you need to vote, Councillor Cromwell? I'm not asking twice, sorry. Thank you. So the count is 6-3, sorry, 5-3. The motion is adopted.
Mr. Chairman, just a suggestion. The motion was to authorize a letter. It didn't say that letter.
Precisely.
So if it please council, we could take the basis of their letter and say we fully support the concept, but there's a few things we'd like to be taken into consideration. The impact on our local communities, and maybe even cite the Wandering River example as hasn't been exactly perfect. It's been great for Fort McMurray. It's been great for the province, but local communities are affected. And so we can support it and still have some reservations that can be deferred to the design stage. Is that fair?
So something that includes a comment that we'd like input into the alignment when the time comes. or
Absolutely.
We support it, but anticipate participation and input
Right.
into the alignment.
And inclusion of Village of Boyle in the discussion, et cetera.
Does that everybody feel happy with that? So I think the motion is broad enough that
Yeah,
the
it's,
CIO's team can write that up.
the motion is just a letter, Mr. Chairman. So I think we have some liberty there.
I didn't actually read that it had to be this letter. It would be appropriate to entertain a motion to enter closed session. Councillor Cromwell has moved. Is there any further discussion? Oh, sorry, on the question of the adoption of the motion to enter closed session, all those in favor? Opposed, the count is 8-0 and the motion is adopted. All right, we have left closed session. We've had a bit of a break. We left closed session about 1:18. We are reconvening after a short recess. Councillor Holland has made a motion. Just now, she told me that she wanted to do this. County Council adopt the attached salary grid for staff and apply retroactive to January 1st, 2024. And further that the County Council rescind policy 4201 rate of pay. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Question is on the adoption of that motion. The council adopt the attached salary grid for staff and apply retroactive to January 1, 2024. And the county council rescind policy 4201 rate of pay. All those in favor? Opposed? The count is 8-0 and the motion is adopted. There is no further business on the agenda of the special meeting. Therefore, the meeting is adjourned at 1:23.